I have such a special guest on today for my live stream. And I'm just so glad that he said yes to this because this is going to kickstart quite a few different live chats that I'm going to have just with friends that I feel have a specific expertise and awareness around a dimension or maybe more than one dimension regarding spiritual awakening in general. And then more specifically, how that can be very overwhelming, particularly when it comes to anxiety. So many people book sessions with me based off of needing to navigate a spiritual awakening, and that's kind of the point. But then there's stuff that I feel like people should really know and then have those resources because it's more of a physiological complex that is really fueling that anxiety. Because if we look at anxiety in general, there's so many things feeding into that. And so, of course, I always go to the largest. I go to the spiritual, the esoteric level. But that doesn't always mean that that's every single dimension of it. That doesn't mean that that's every single facet, because by the time we're here in the 3D, there's also other things we need to be aware of in order to really help understand all the different layers of our body, mind, spirit. And so I have Mark here from Afterskool and from his podcast Before School, which is on fire, by the way. Mark,
thank you.
I will go on in a second how your podcast is seriously the most light work like I can feel in a sense in such a long time. So, but
wow, well, that's huge thanks to you, because I think things really took off when you joined the podcast. I mean, that was my first episode that really blasted off.
Oh, really?
I think so, yeah.
Cool.
We'll have to do round 2.
And that's evergreen on my website. Oh yeah, I can't wait for round 2.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's evergreen on my website. So I hope people are always finding you through there. But yeah, so what I've really seen about both your Afterskool channel and your Before School podcast is that whether, I don't know if you know this or not, but it's interdisciplinary. It's exactly what is so like, it's integral is basically what I mean. You are, you'll have an Alan Watts thing one day. And then the next you can talk about neuroplasticity. And then the next you could talk about microplastics. And then you could go esoteric. I've seen your collabs with Agrippa's Diary. And I'm like, oh, wow. Like your range and the depth and width is like so amazing. And one, thank you.
Aw, thank you.
And then also, I purposely didn't watch your microplastics video so that I'm going to watch it after this. But I was like, no, don't watch it because I don't want to go in with anything preconceived. I want to just get your expertise from what you know and you learned from that collaboration, because you won an Emmy for that collaboration.
Yeah. Well, first I'll say this has been incredibly humbling hearing you say these things, because I look up to you as a role model and a teacher and a great communicator. And I'm amazed how you can just flip on a camera and just like channel this divine message and deliver it to us. And you have an incredible combination of like, you're very sensitive to energies, but you also have this strong will and confidence. Usually you don't get those two, it's like full steam ahead with the message. Whereas, a lot of people who are very sensitive to energies, they get overwhelmed and they don't feel comfortable coming out and talking about it. You usually get one or the other, basically. So you're that dynamite combination.
Oh, wow. What a big honor. Thank you.
Yeah. And then, so we want to talk about microplastics now. And I made a couple of videos about 3 years ago covering the decline in sperm count. And this decline, at first the studies were out of America, but then they did this meta-analysis, and it turns out that this decline in sperm count is across the whole world. And long story short, I'm not an expert in this at all. This was with Dr. Shauna Swan, who's done phenomenal work. She's been studying this for 40 years. Basically, she found that sperm count has declined 1% per year for the last 50 years. So men in the 1970s had double the sperm count as men today. And the crazy thing is this decline is not just linear. It's actually accelerating. At first, it was like 0.5% per year, 0.7%, and now it's almost 3% per year. So and I guess I'll jump to the reaction. A lot of people are like, oh, good, less people on Earth, this, or this means I get to have a lot more sex and not worry about impregnating somebody, I guess. Regardless of what your reaction is about fertility and all that, I believe that it is a human's right to be able to reproduce if they want to. And so there's these forces that are acting upon our bodies that we didn't choose. It's not a part of our choice, basically. And so these chemicals are called endocrine disruptors. And the main culprit is coming from microplastics. And these microplastics are found in literally everything, which is kind of terrifying. Like, I've tried really hard to keep myself away from microplastics, and it's pretty much impossible. But from what Dr. Shauna Swan says, the ultimate no-no is do not microwave anything in plastic. That's like the worst thing you can do. And just try your best to go to the farmer's market. But these microplastics are in makeup, they're in farming materials, they're in pesticides. So, you try your best to eat organic, but it's expensive. Removing plastic from your life is very expensive. So I don't know if I kind of like jumped around a lot there, but that's the gist of it, that these microplastics, they did this experiment that proved that if you expose somebody to these microplastics, that lowers sperm count, but it also does things like it lowers testosterone incredibly. And the research that this was done was all done in the womb, which is crazy. Like,
Whoa.
So what happens? I'm like explaining this horribly. You're gonna have to watch the video, but I had to rewatch the video right before we talked to just kind of like catch myself up on it. But what happens is, in the womb, the default sex of every person is female.
Right.
So every fertilized egg starts as a female.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the delivery of testosterone that masculinizes a fetus. And if you get these endocrine disrupting chemicals, that testosterone isn't delivered. And you have this less masculinized, less formed, lower sperm count, and that lasts your whole life. So this very critical period in the womb can have a tremendous impact on your whole life. And the research is fairly controversial because there's a lot of assumptions and speculation that come from it. So I guess I'll stop there, but it's basically microplastics are a huge culprit in what's lowering sperm count, testosterone, and fertility.
Wow. Yeah, I told somebody a while ago that was talking about how they wanted boys, and I was like, oh yeah, boys are more rare. And she was like, what? And like, I remember things from college, but a lot happened between college. So all I know are things that sound really like moonshine in the back, like sketchy. Like they go like, yeah, no, boys are hard to make. I just don't remember the math. So yeah, that tracks. But just so you know, because I didn't get to say this beforehand because we were dealing with those audio issues, you have as much space. I am not waiting to jump you like a jaguar to talk over you. So please don't feel like if you aren't thinking fast enough that I'm going to cut you off, because I'm not.
Well, part of me is praying that you cut me off and just bail me out.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, feel free to cut me off as much as you want.
Okay, yeah. So cool. Okay, so what I learned last year through the Fascia Network of the body completely clicked in about your microplastics collaboration you did, as well as so many other hidden esoteric factors into people's anxiety. So I don't know it per se from the hormone endocrine disruptor paradigm, but I've heard of that. And there's a lot, even in the conscious community, of awareness around that through like frogs.
Frogs were part of this story.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So the frog thing is what I call it. But also beyond that, we can see how that would disrupt methylation. And methylation, it's It's essentially how chemical reactions, the sequence of chemical reactions in the body, and when there's too much disruption in that, then a person can't like detox. So it affects more than detoxification. Methylation is literally more than that, but how it shows its stress, how it cries the most is through built up toxins that essentially a person can't have their detoxification pathways working properly. And so things get really pent up inside their body and their anatomy and their physiology. And so because of that, anxiety can be coming from this paradigm. And so you guys, to kick off all of the physiological esoteric contributions to anxiety, that's why I chose microplastics to start. Because as you guys know, I go big picture all the time. I look at everything from the highest spiritual lens, because that's the one that I think people, I just always go to where is the most obscure place and where can I enhance light? So I normally start off really big picture, but for this series, everyone already knows that because I did an anxiety video, esoteric. So I already started off 2 years ago, a really broad lens. And I said that, yeah, anxiety is kind of the baseline for somebody who's not awakened, because the point is to become aware. And if you're stuck in a character, you will suffer and you will get neurosis. And that neurosis will produce the offspring of constant anxiety, because you're not only your character and you're trying desperately to be. The amount of energy it takes to even create a facade of status will make a person anxious. So that's where I started it off. And I think that's fair enough to say that's pretty big picture. That's Buddhist, Gnostic, fun going on there. And so here is where it's like, now let's go to the very micro level and build from that back up to where I started. So I think microplastics are the most non-acknowledged and the most obscure form of where anxiety is being heavily contributed. Because, okay, so I have a myofascial therapist. She's actually retired. She's an expert in her field. She gives full-blown lectures at Stanford, at really reputable places, which is why I don't know if she'll come on here. I don't want to blow her cover, but she's a total light worker, and she has a team of light workers in different fields that are all having to do now with some sort of study of how structure and the fascia network are behind so much of our autoimmunity and cascade effect into all these different diseases and ailments. And what she found and she taught me was that it all starts with the jaw. If we didn't get properly breastfed, if we didn't get breastfed long enough, then the jaw can't develop, because the jaw is getting muscles from the sucking. So the jaw needs to suck, and that's how it develops. Now, that ends up being how a person can digest food, how that sets off their enzymes. So if we don't have the proper structure first, we'll go after reconstructive jaw surgery, after reconstructive jaw surgery, and we will live in pain off of these surgeries that will never get to the point, because the point is structure and function. And you're trying to fix it without fixing the actual underlying structure and function. And it's actually cheaper, way cheaper and way less painful to fix the underlying problem through, you'd have to do exercises, but that would end up being far cheaper and less painful in the long run. And that would go straight to the core of the issue. So now I'm starting to see people's anxiety, not just through the most esoteric lens. I could actually deal with negative entities easier than telling the person, look, we need to look at your jaw structure and neck.
Sarah, can you still hear me?
Yeah. Do you
okay.
have, I can continue to go on, but I want
to
take a breath.
There was a lot of things you said there that resonated deeply. I think this is kind of connected to everything we just talked about, but I just finished a video on the hidden consequences or the hidden health effects of birth control, hormonal birth control. And it was a very similar investigation to the microplastics ones. I like to kind of take a certain chemical or a common drug that's used and look at maybe the dark side that's not talked about quite a bit. So birth control, hormonal birth control has been used for the last 80 years or so, or 70 years. And people don't like to point out things that are wrong with it because it, on a societal level, people look at it like it's liberated women in a big way. If you look at the timing of when birth control was introduced, and then you look at women going into the professional fields, into law, into doctors, applications to college, it just skyrockets after because birth control allows women to plan their lives. So any research that comes out and says, hey, this is actually pretty bad for you, or there's these unintended consequences, it often gets buried because it doesn't fall in line with this certain agenda.
Mhm.
But I think it's time to recognize that what you're doing is you're really messing with your hormones artificially when you take hormonal birth control, and that goes right to your brain, and that completely changes the way you see the world. So this goes right to the thing we just talked about with the jaw. When a woman takes hormonal birth control, this lowers her estrogen and boosts her progesterone. Kind of makes her body feel like it's pregnant. That's why she can't get pregnant. And this lowers libido greatly, but this also greatly changes who she prefers in a mate. So the craziest thing is if a woman has a lot of estrogen, she prefers a mate with a lot of testosterone. And the clearest marker of testosterone is in the jaw. So they did these experiments where they had women who were on birth control select who they preferred, who they were most attracted to. And when they were on birth control, they selected men that had these really soft jaws and no chin, kind of like the straight lips to the neck kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
like a guy who has a ton of testosterone usually has a very thick, square jaw and a
Yeah,
thicker
like my
neck. And yeah, and that's one of the clearest signs of high testosterone is in the jaw. And so it was extraordinary, the difference of preference on and off birth control. And it's just wild how many second order and third order effects there are from this. If you are on birth control and you start dating and then you get married and then you get off the birth control pill to have kids, this could send you over the tipping point, and you could be like, who's my partner? I'm not really attracted to this person anymore. It has really big implications. And birth control is still something that I'm not going to demonize it. If people want to take it, they can take it, but they should know how this can affect their brain at least.
No, absolutely. Back to my moonshine wisdom. It's like if you change your period, then that's going to affect everything else. Like things just make sense. So, I mean, I get it. That's funny that you mentioned the jaw, though, because actually sometimes people like to think I'm a man and I'm not. I think that they're just not used to seeing Arab women. So, but one of the things that I have to do for the exercises, my therapist, the one who's retired, she was like, your jaw's not big enough for your body. And I'm laughing, going like, I in no way have an underdeveloped jaw. And she's telling me, and then the person who did the tongue tie, the first part of the tongue tie surgery, I haven't gone back. She didn't want to shock my body when I did the first round of the tongue tie, because I have such a severe one that they said there's no point. It's not like if we do it all at once that it will be better. It might shock your body too much. So let's just do a couple of tendons, and then we'll work for a few months with myofascial exercises so that we're strengthening your tongue, since you've never used the back of it before because it's been tied. Which she said tongue ties, she believes, are due to microplastics.
Really?
She believes that the Fascia Network this is why I wanted to do this with you. It's because she said that we're turning into plastic people. Wasn't that the thumbnail that you did for that episode?
That was actually the name of the documentary that won the Emmy. We're all plastic people now. And
okay, well, she said that.
Huh.
Yeah, go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say I haven't heard of it causing anything other than like fertility issues, but I mean, yeah, that makes sense that it could affect all aspects of the body and mind.
Well, the Fascia Network has a very important esoteric purpose, and it's meant to be. So there's these things called, they're just organic filters, you could call it that. And grass serves as one. Even the color green serves as one when we see in nature, and there's even a function for why green is green. And so there's these organic filters that entrap, in a good way, organic energy from the sun. And the Fascia Network does the same for our vehicle. So the Fascia Network has a very important, our whole body's technology. And the Fascia Network is meant to receive upgrades that we receive from the grand central sun, from our environment. And so if we're receiving an upgrade, and then the Fascia Network distributes it and disperses it. So when I heard that the plastic people things particularly so intense, that even these connections, because you have to think about, well, what's if there's a function, right? Like the anatomy and biology has a purpose for whatever it is, even if we might not know it. And so to look at ties like that as actually being only a visible representation of what's going on in your Fascia Network due to something that isn't necessarily a part of that spiritual technology is quite, I mean, it doesn't scare me. I just want to let everyone know really quick, nothing I'm talking about I find scary. And so this isn't to elicit fear, but with awareness, it's okay if that's there, but that's just not what's trying to be elicited. It's just awareness.
I guess I haven't really heard much about the Fascia Network. What is it?
So the Fascia Network is the fibers. It has different layers to it, but it's the fibers that act as the glue to the body. So like the dermis is the higher levels of skin, and each one of them serves an important function. But the Fascia Network is the literal glue. It's like, why does your shoulder stay on your shoulder?
Okay.
The dermis wouldn't do that, but the fascia is that sticky glue. So you could also kind of see how it's sticky enough. And with the plastics, it's almost like it's almost like binding too much. Yeah.
Yeah, I did a video a long time ago with Dr. Zach Bush, and I'll butcher his theories, but he talked about how glyphosate interferes with the connections between cells, and that causes chronic illness, autism, tons of things.
Yeah.
And if you look at correlation, does not always prove causation, but if you look at the introduction of glyphosate into the food supply, all these chronic illnesses just skyrocket ever since it was introduced. So I like what we're doing here. I mean, I love to look at things on many different levels. So we have like the mental level, the spiritual level, we have the biology, the cellular, the historical. There's so many different angles, and I think that's one of the compliments you so nicely gave me in the beginning, is like, it seems like there's a ton of random topics on Afterskool, but they're really all part of this like vortex spinning together to create this one understanding, which I don't have, by the way.
Well, all we can do is be sincere. So, but it's important to grab those different departments or disciplinaries and then synthesize them. And so that's what it is, because at a higher level, we have now souls choosing into really intense, even what would look and present as almost what we would define as autistic experiences, who are high level consciousness beings, that it almost breaks my heart, to be honest. Don't worry, you guys, we'll get 3D again in a second, but really quick.
I'm not seeing any comments. Are they saying we need to get back to the 5D?
No, it's just me. Yeah, like really high level consciousness souls choosing into experiences that they probably are not, they're having to reconcile that choice. And this is what we kind of, I love how Alan Watts says that the more conscious you become, the more sensitive you become. I like to troll my audience and share that seasonally, because somehow that's triggering. Somehow that beautiful knowledge is triggering, but really it doesn't mean that we're weak. Sometimes we just view enlightenment as psychopathy, and it's not. There's a sensitivity that is required for those higher states of consciousness. But anyways, when I view the chasm between the choice that are being made and the experience, it's far different when you're behind the veil. To go, yeah, I'll help humanity. And then you're here and you're in a vehicle that's not responding to your high consciousness. You're playing out lessons for your environment about unconditional love and about transparency and opening the heart. It doesn't always translate to, this is a bang up experience. And that actually is a silent thing that breaks my heart on a daily. But beyond that, then we have the layer we're talking about, which is what's going on to the gut biome through this, through the glyphosate. When you have a giant beyond billionaire company that keeps getting lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, and they're paying for it rather than changing their product, that is legitimately a bad business move. So why would you do it? Business isn't the point. Business has nothing to do with it. A great businessman could see that, wow, toxicity isn't serving. I have all these bills to, no, this is beyond business.
Now we're getting good. All right, what is this really about?
Exactly. But really quick, do you know the Dr. Rhonda something?
Oh, Rhonda Patrick.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I follow her on Instagram, and I saw that she made a reel about black microplastics in particular. Did you see that?
That sounds racist. I'm just kidding. How dare she?
It's the black microplastics.
The black microplastics are just as good as the white microplastics.
Well, according to her reel, the ones that, and I see this on my latte lids. So now I'm like, and I take the latte lids off because my life isn't complex enough. So now I walk around up, make sure the latte doesn't fall out. But the black microplastics are the ones that have, I forget exactly, but they're the most toxic form of all of them. And yeah, now I see the black microplastics and I'm like, oh.
Well, I now have a whole new thing to worry about.
Yeah, check out that reel she did. Or maybe it was Zero Waste Planet. I'm on one of them. We're gonna take a real quick break I've been meaning to tell you this since I met you. Do you know that you look like a Lyran starseed?
What is that?
Lyran. Have you ever heard of Lyrans?
No.
The very first time we hopped on a Zoom, I was like, oh, and I was like, don't say that. And then I just never said it, but now I have to say it. You look like a freaking Lyran starseed, like really obvious.
All right, I'm going to look this up.
Yeah, you should. I think you'd get a kick out of that. Okay, now this time.
Star.
Oh, we're doing Joe Rogan right now, where you look it up right now.
Okay, these kind of look like the blue people from Avatar. A little bit. That's a massive compliment. I'll take it.
That was just on my notes for the live stream, so I'm going through my notes. Okay, so my next.
I mean, actually, that seems like an amazing compliment. Thank you.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, thank you. So one of my chiropractors thought it'd be really cool if he turned me into the Karate Kid. So he literally made me learn everything. He would have a whiteboard and he'd go, okay, now the hypothalamus sends the signal to the pituitary. Like it was just one of those things where he really felt like teaching, even if I wasn't in the state to learn. So now I know a whole bunch of stuff. And one of the things I learned was that if the body doesn't have enough zinc, this is back to the anxiety talk, and you could talk about Lyrans, why not? If the body doesn't have enough zinc, and if you look on the periodic table, zinc has a specific lock and key, just like everything has a lock and key transporter in our body. The body will do with something toxic if it fits the lock and key well enough, but it's not a perfect fit the way that zinc's a perfect fit. So what the body will do is it'll hold on to something on the periodic table that has something of a resemblance. And this is why our bodies hold on to heavy metals and they don't respond perfectly to things, to detoxes all the time. If the body doesn't have what it needs, it will hold on to something toxin in its place. So there's even whole systems that go, well, if you just give your body enough selenium, if you give your body enough zinc, whatever the mineral is that is needed, then that will naturally detox, because then the body will naturally let go of what it doesn't need, because now it has that zinc, so it can take that in its place. So the body's kind of like a hermit crab. You know the crabs that you see with the plastic bottle on their back?
Oh, yeah.
So I want, the reason I'm saying this is to give a very, what I would consider accessible solution. If people are worried about that and they're going like, my physiology is now on an automated form and I'm anxious or I'm depressed or I'm overwhelmed easily, on top of learning about all of these different layers of awakening, we just start back to a high quality salt. So we just start looking at minerals. Where is my body needing mineral support? Because where the body needs mineral support is where it will naturally go, wow, I am so happy now that I'm getting my mineral support. I don't need that. I don't need this microplastic I've been holding on, all these things. Then even the body will naturally be strong enough to release the microplastics. Because I've asked people how to release them, and the best answer I've got was from Paul Chek. He just said enzymes. Enzymes, because what do enzymes do? They break something down.
I love asking Paul Chek questions, because you can ask him the simple. He was smoking something on our podcast, and I was like, "Oh, what are you smoking?" And it was like a 40-minute answer. That was like the first 40 minutes of our podcast. But
so funny.
Yeah, as it pertains to anxiety, I don't know about enzymes or the biology of it, but I just know about like my own simple practices that, I can see when it's building up in myself, when like little demons are creeping up. And I think of my own mental health as like an onion, and each layer of the onion is a practice that kind of insulates me from the demons or protects me from them. So like exercise is the most foundational, fundamental thing. Like every morning I try to do really hard exercise. And then, are you getting good sleep? That's exercise and sleep are like 1 and 2. And I'm doing a huge video right now, massive video on sleep. I've never covered this topic, but it's just something I'm thinking about now, especially since I have a newborn and I'm getting almost no sleep. I'm really like thinking about, okay, how important is sleep? And it turns out that there's a thing called a chronotype, and we're all genetically disposed to having a certain chronotype, where we naturally are night people or morning people or extreme night people or extreme morning. And so if you understand your chronotype, that will help you, navigate when you're supposed to go to bed. Because a lot of people are like extreme night people, but they're forced to wake up really early. And it doesn't matter if they got 8 hours of sleep, they're still going to be really groggy. And their internal clocks are going to be all offset. So anyways, yeah, sleep, exercise, diet, I'm not really saying anything that revolutionary here. And then just, are you saying prayers? Are you taking a minute how's your relationship with your loved ones? Do you have like a gratitude practice? Are you, do you have time to create? It's very important to have like creative outlets. Did you spend time with friends? Like these are just basic things, but every one of these things I look at as like a layer in the onion.
Absolutely. I'm still gonna ask you at the end for advice to navigate, but I'm so glad that you sandwiched that into this, because it is definitely like surfing. We are surfing intense energies, and it's so to me it's fun, but it's so complicated for a lot of people, or overwhelming to have to be aware of this realm and this layer. And then it's like, well, how do I piece together this information and make it work with this? Or sometimes there's just embellished truths to such a great extent that it's like, and those are lessons in discernment too. But then we have to go down that and say, okay, at what point is this now? There was a lot of understanding and truth in that layer. And now if I continue to go down that wormhole, then that might actually, like, I get it. Like how much is enough of that? And so it's all this navigation. And that's why I titled this Navigating Awakening, because there's so many different layers to it. And I think that the microplastics layer, I know that we've talked a lot about that already, so I will move on. But I feel like that is such the place to begin, with understanding that when we are depressed, or when we're overwhelmed, or when we're anxious, if we're not unaware of the vessel that we came into the third density to even be in, and we just go straight to the highest truth, that's not really even acknowledging that. And I'm so down for miracles, and this isn't really against miracles, but it's more about really understanding that it's not hyperactive mental awareness to know why you came into the 3D and how to take care of your body, especially if you projected yourself into an age that is as volatile as this one. It wasn't meant to go straight to like, oh, I don't need to know that. That's just a theory. Or I don't need to be aware of that because that's negative. It's like a person can be too positive and that will lead them to negativity. And so I like starting here because it's really something that is not meant to make a person neurotic, but it's a truth that's happening whether they know it or not. And if we're anxious, then it's really great to understand what that spectrum is and then what could be the most contributing factors to it.
Yeah, a lot of what you just said resonated with me, and I had questions for you actually about awakening and like, can you awaken too much? Is there a limit to the awakening, or can you go too far with it? Because I feel like I've done a lot of my big awakenings a couple years ago, and I've actually left some of those big spiritual ideas. I probably shouldn't revisit them, but a lot of the topics I've been exploring lately are more on the physical level, and less about the Thoth's teaching, or the what's underneath the pyramids, or sacred geometry. These deep spiritual ideas, I probably should return to them. I look at like knowledge seeking as a spiral.
Yeah.
You kind of return to these old ideas, but you're from a different height or a different level, but you're looking at the same subject from a deeper level. So yeah, I'm spiraling on different subjects, returning to old ones, but yeah, I guess back to my question, could you like awaken too much, or yeah.
That's a great question, because the I would say no, but then when you're defining, you didn't say this is my definition, but when you said what you were considering like too much awakening, I view that as almost like a sample platter. The sample platter is like for instance, if I were on the sample platter, I'd be like esoteric. So you try the whole sample platter, and then you go, what do I value the most out of that sample platter? And based off of what you value the most, that will kind of show you personally what dimensions that matter most to you when it comes to awakening. But a lot of times people are receiving a sample platter of different things. And I got that a lot over a decade ago with like space. And intuitively I went, I know what I know, and I'm not in denial. I don't need to go down that realm. So, and plus having strong logic helps so much, because then it's a menu and you start seeing things like a menu where it goes, well, that was wrong. So you don't need to even go down the rest because it stopped there at being correct. Does that make sense?
Wait, can you elaborate? Like you don't go any deeper?
On specific things. Like for instance, spheres. To me, innately, this is just my own knowing, spheres are natural. So if something's going, things aren't spherical. Already, it's like, are things spherical? Yes. Okay, don't go down further. Does that make sense? Like there's certain, I know that was a vague one because it's just because like I want people to be able to understand the template, but then insert themselves in it. So I'm purposely trying to be vague and not give like a defined example. Also, I hold a lot of space for different people's beliefs here. So I don't want to like mention one specifically that somebody might really hold close to their heart and be passionate about. But there's topics of knowledge that have just been an obvious like to me, at least for my own discernment and clarity, like I don't need to investigate that anymore because I already know the energies that's coming behind that thing. I'll give you one example. I don't know. It's off the top of my head. Like, is a solution for evolution going to Mars? No, it's not at all. It can be avoidance of human trafficking. It could be avoidance of having to purify our ocean with that money that could be used for that technology, which is already available. Why are real solutions being suppressed while fake solutions are being romanticized, sensationalized, made as innovation? So my logic already goes, this is a negative energy of stream that's feeding into that finances. Why? Because leaving for a better place that is clearly not a better place is not a solution. That tells me all I need to know from what's feeding that thought form. Does that make sense now?
That totally makes sense. I do believe that it is our destiny to become a cosmic civilization. And, you know, I'm not trying to live on Mars. I know that Earth is a trillion times better. And we couldn't be living in this beautiful Garden of Eden here. But I find it exciting getting up in the morning and thinking that we could get to other planets. That I think Mars is maybe a stepping stone to other things. I have concerns about it though, big concerns, because I don't think that humans in their current form could ever live on Mars. So we would have to probably genetically alter ourselves. And then you bring in a whole ton of ethical questions. Like once you start genetically modifying people, that's a slippery slope. Are they even people anymore?
Did they learn the lessons in the human form and the human initiation? Because if they learned those lessons in the human form and that human initiation, there would not even be the necessity for such extreme alterations in the first place. I'm not saying that there'll be no alterations ever. I'm not a prude about technology. But when it's something that's being presented in a false light, that's when it's like, oh, okay, because there's always going to be context, right? That's actually the most pragmatic and direct way to even sum up what Dharma is. Dharma would be, is killing that person good? Never. Well, context might say else. So context is actually a highly spiritual thing called discernment, Dharma, all these different things. So I won't say I'll never reduce something to an extreme, but I will, there might come a time. But for me, with technology, that does not need to be absolutes. All are bad in all contexts, because it would depend on context. but I can de-escalate that example to make it far more pragmatic. What kind of thought form would not invest at all in the oceans and actually fuels animal testing for their paradigm? Wouldn't that need to be solved first before then you have a genuine force that makes sense to go to Mars? If you have toxins all here, which I mean by slavery of any form, and then the next thing is missing a huge gap in that evolutionary arc, that's where my menu goes, oh, I know what's feeding that.
Yeah, I've heard Terence McKenna discuss this idea of the conditions for what it would take for us to leave Earth and become multiplanetary. And I think he says it's going to be like a bloodbath when we leave. It's going to be a madhouse when we finally depart for the stars. And Ram Dass talks about this philosophy. Can you act if you're really happy and content? I mean, if you're happy and content, you're not going to do anything. We only really start to move when we're uncomfortable. So I don't, maybe, if this is a pristine Garden of Eden, we're not really trying to get off it. So I agree with you. We should totally fix all those problems.
Yeah.
But back to what Alan Watts said earlier in our conversation, he talked about how disharmony on one level is harmony on another level. So right now in our bodies, there is a war happening between our immune systems and viruses and pathogens and bacteria. There's like a crazy war happening, but I'm sitting here talking to you feeling fine. And then on a higher level, there's wars in parts of the world. There's there's mental health issues. There's all sorts of issues around the world. But then if you zoom out on another level, the Earth is still orbiting and spinning and it's all fine. So it's nice to be able to bounce around to certain levels and see things from above and below. And okay, it's all good. But that certainly doesn't mean you should be disconnected and not have like your heart break when there is a tragedy. You can't just, somebody falls in front of you and you're like, oh, that's just part of the world. Yep. On a higher level, things are great for you. No, I mean, you as a human, you have to get down on one knee and help that person up. That's your humanity. But your divinity is seeing that everything that's happening, no matter how bad, is part of a perfect order.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. And I really enjoy the discourse because I don't normally receive anymore. I was a part of a debate team in college for a very short time. So I don't receive that great of discourse. And I really liked that because that was one that came from not just an alternative perspective, but actually a very intelligent alternative perspective. I just got done filming my first season with Gaia of Mystery Teachings. And in there, I talk about Sunyata Dharma, or what's known as natural law. And in natural law, essentially, it's kind of the baseline for those higher vibratory experiences. For instance, have you ever seen those funny memes where you see the aliens and they're like, oh, we're going by Earth, put the lock on the ship. It's because we're not in natural law. So we want almost an artificial rite of passage without genuinely getting there, which is by embodying natural law. And through that, it wouldn't be a utopia because there would always be some sort of dynamic play. We would need the dynamic play. But the issue is that we've pathologized, we have normalized pathology. So what we consider even tension is now actually at such a pathological level that it's too extreme. And it's almost like we don't know how to grow without having there be the karma and dharma. Karma and dharma. It's more like a negative feedback loop of karmic, karmic, karmic. And this, now I'm going to give everyone a sneak peek of an upcoming transmission at one of my soul gatherings. That's what Prison Planet is. That is literally when a time space becomes hell. It's when it's stuck in a negative feedback loop that it will not get out of, because there's too much locked in place for it to now make that reverse revolution, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. So how do you stop that negative feedback loop? How do you reverse course?
Unity consciousness. Unity consciousness is also known as Christ consciousness. In Gnosticism, there was much more of a, I know you already know this because we spoke about the Gospel of Thomas, but
I don't. So,
okay.
I mean,
So
maybe I forgot.
Give the person who I'm speaking to a little bit of credit so I don't look like I'm talking at them. So that's just all.
I think you're giving me way too much. Just talk to me like you're talking to a fifth grader.
Okay. All right. Well, I have an ego. So when I talk to people, I acknowledge they do too. So I go, oh, as you know. And so that's all that was.
I was conflicted because I felt so good that you thought that I knew about it. But then I was also like, I don't know about it.
No, that was just me kind of like, trying to, not over ego you. So the Christ consciousness in Gnosticism is known as the Savior, because it's literally the archetype, the level of consciousness that can actually step into a space-time and be able to retrieve, which is a deep theme in alchemy. Alchemy at the spiritual level is an act of redemption of the soul, or it is an act of retrieving something that has been too lost at sea. So, but what makes it a hell realm, which adds up perfectly with why people think this is a prison planet, and even Masonry teaches that. So it's not something that was just a conspiracy-minded thing that some people who got too down a wormhole. I like to defend thoughts when I find them coming from an intelligent stream, even if I don't fully agree with it. So that's why I'm like coming from that vein. It's not necessarily because I believe this is the prison planet, but I see their point, and they're not just these paranoid people. They genuinely believe this is the prison planet. And if we were to look at the criteria, all the criteria would meet for that definition. And so I'm just going by an objective way of defining it. So I understand why people perceive that it would be a prison planet, and how my own perception would use it in my own language. It would be when you get so much into a negative feedback loop karmically that now it's interlocking and strengthening with every revolution of that cycle.
Well explained. Well said.
Oh, good. So we can move on.
Yeah, I mean, the things that you talk about are very high level. I'm going to have to go review these things 100%. But I love how you just put it out there. And, it's a lot to digest. And I'm going to have to rewatch this and rewatch more of your videos.
Oh, yeah. I'm what I just said was a full-blown download I received in the airport, and all I wrote down was like one word, because it's so hard to put words to the downloads, because what we think of things is not really like, it's really just you would need like a universal translator or Rosetta Stone. It's not coming in English.
100%. I mean, words are clumsy, and they often get misunderstood. In fact, the more profound the idea, the more it probably gets misunderstood, because it's beyond words.
Yeah. This is actually a beautiful segue to the next thing I wanted to touch on before we take 2 questions. I want you to take the questions if you're okay with that, because I'm sure my audience is used to me taking questions. But you did an episode of Before School with David Kipling, is it? Dr. David Kipling?
Yeah, Kipping.
Okay, so thank you for summarizing that episode in a 10-minute animation, because I did not have time yet to watch the full thing, but that animation was great, and I sent it to so many people. Could you briefly kind of explain what he's defining as a simulation
Yeah. First of all, I'm amazed you even watched that because that's by far my least viewed video ever.
It needs to
Um,
be like shared with everyone.
yeah, so I've come out with 2 videos on the simulation. One was explaining how we're probably in a simulation, and I think a lot of people are familiar with that idea. Elon Musk has talked about it a lot, how, if we are able to create a simulation that is so real that we can't tell that it's very likely that it's already happened and that we're living in that simulation. So then a a lot of people are like, all right, the Matrix is very popular in our culture. That idea has really dug itself into the culture and our minds. But there's many arguments that are counter to that. And so David Kipping has a great one where he says that if we are living in a simulation, and there's like a tree of simulations within simulations within simulations, each simulation below a simulation is going to be less complex than the one above. So eventually you're going to have a level of simulations that are going to be so simple it's going to be like Super Mario, and they won't be able to reproduce and create more simulations. And he calls this the sewer of reality. And he says probably there's a lot more simulations that can't replicate themselves than ones that can, based on probabilities. So he says there's a slight probability that we're not living in a simulation. It's not it's not like the most compelling fact-based argument that you can walk away with and say, we're definitely not living in a simulation. It's more like you walk away from it and you're like, all right, so there's like a 49% chance that we're living in a simulation, 51% that we're not. Um, to be honest, I don't really know what to do with this idea. I mean, it's exhausted quite a bit of mental energy from a lot of smart minds. And if we are okay, I don't know what to really do with that information. If we're not, that's great. I think there might be somewhat of a darker agenda behind trying to get people to think that they're living in a simulation though, perhaps. Um, I haven't really thought this through fully, but I think that it affects your behavior. If you think that you're just some NPC in a video game or something, that how is that going to affect your life? And I look around cities and modern buildings and modern architecture, and it's all so boxy, and it's concrete and metal, and it's all kind of like just copied from the next one. Everything's very just colorless and there's no art on it. And then I look at like the ancient buildings with all these like gargoyles and beautiful sculptures, and it really creates a very different level of consciousness. And I feel like a lot of these new things, this new environment we're creating, makes you feel like you're this temporary, fleeting, insignificant thing in this matrix. I don't know if that makes sense.
That's beautiful. So I'm going to take a long detour back to that, but it starts in Silver Lake. Have you ever heard of Silver Lake?
Los Angeles?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, in the 20s, it was like heaven to me. It was hipster paradise.
The 20s?
Oh no, when I was in my 20s.
Oh, okay. I was like the 1920s. Are you?
Yeah, it was hipster paradise. Movie screen there. Yeah, it's like, and now I think I'm having a midlife crisis, but it's not intense. It's just me like wishing I was back at this one music festival there. And if that's what a midlife crisis is, I'll take that. Because it was like Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros they were playing. And yeah, I don't know if you know them.
Don't.
Okay. Well, they're really cool. So the reason I brought them up is because all of the musical talent in almost like America, but definitely like Tennessee, comes to Silver Lake. So I don't know what's going on there anymore. I kind of get emotional when I drive through there because it just looks like a portal to hell. But all of the musicians. So back then, I don't know how it is now. It could be like this still, but you could go for $10 to $15 at the door, and go into one of the music venues there, and you could hear, and I'm not even kidding, I am not embellishing anything, you could hear the most talented people that deserve to be on whatever radio, whatever they deserve to be signed. These are the highest talent of folk, the highest talent of alternative anything. These are just like extremely talented musicians of all kinds. And I've never heard them on the radio, and I'm not bashing anyone on the radio. This isn't about that. The point is that how many of those people genuinely can financially support themselves in their own dharma? And it's almost like why what you said brings that up to me is because I've heard the case a lot, actually, about looking towards 2,000 years, maybe even just 1,000 years, to some sort of beauty. And that's almost been like, I understand, because also when you look at the art of an age, you could see how much it's degenerated. And I think that's like exactly what you said. And how much of that is like, well, we actually, even with microplastics, even with whatever they're spraying in the sky, actually, it's not that, it's prostitution. Will we lower our art? Will the right people in the right places be able, like, it's systemic almost more than it is anything else, in my personal opinion. And that's just one example. It's Silver Lake. It's how much beauty, because I just pointed out hipster music, how much beauty from every single dimension of this earth experience is dependent on some sort of systemic sickness.
Yeah, I've noticed it everywhere. Are you from Silver Lake?
No.
Okay, you just have a lot of emotional connection to that area.
Yeah, I have great memories there.
Yeah, I guess I was just bringing all this up to say that I marvel at cathedrals and ancient sites and just the beauty and the time that went into them. It's hard to fathom that somebody could spend an entire lifetime carving one wall. Like, I think we often turn to, oh my God, that must be a lost technology that did this wall, because our consciousness is so different that we're like, I wouldn't spend more than 10 minutes on a wall like this.
Yeah.
But if you had 70 years and a toothpick, you could do that. If you were dedicated for 70 years and committed that much, you could create that wall, possibly. And if you had skill and determination. So I think we've just, everything's so cheap and temporary now that it makes you feel cheap and temporary. Or at least, when I'm walking through these downtown areas where everything's concrete and glass and the building's been put up in, as quick as possible. Everything's done as efficiently and as for the sake of being efficient and quick and making money. It just, I love seeing old train stations where they have like a lamppost that has leaves on it that are made out of copper or something, that they actually went to the extra effort to. It has a tremendous impact on my consciousness. I don't know if it's everybody, but I think it is. Like, yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. So, okay. So Kipling, Dr. Kipling's?
Kipping. Yeah.
Kipping. Dr. Kipping's thing was that, like, well, it's a little bit higher of a percentage, not much actually, but it's more probable. And the reason why is because of reproductive, meaning creation. But I'm taking that literal now. That's where I'm segueing. The fact that the defining features of a simulation is it loses. It's almost like a picture you take and then you do a copy of a copy of a copy, and it loses more resolution.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And then it gets to maybe too such poor quality resolution that it cannot actually even truly point to that original image. And that would be kind of like what makes it a simulation.
I think that's his argument to say that we couldn't ourselves create a simulation in our reality, because it's more likely than not that whatever simulation we're in is not strong enough to create another simulation.
Understood.
So,
Okay.
at the end of the day, it's like 49.99999% to 50.00001%. It's really kind of almost a toss up, but according to his argument, it's slightly more likely that we're not in a simulation. So do with that information what you will. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so cool. What I like about this is that both ends of the spectrum have a very powerful force behind them, and they're both the same. And I figured this out because I resonate most with Gnosticism. I just say resonate most because I'm a free agent. I expand. So, I would call me like neo-Gnostic, if anything, but I have strong resonance still with the core features of Gnosticism. And what I found out, I'm like, oh, I have to do a video on this, but I'll give you guys a sneak peek. Gnostics are behind both. And I figured this out because I didn't know that the driving force behind we're in a simulation was Gnostics. So is friendly fire. I thought, okay, so Gnosticism is just sus. We're just sus. We're like, nah. So because of that, I was like, who's trying to paint us like we're in a simulation? What a dark force that's trying to cut us off from Sophia. And then other Gnostics, because we're all sus, we're like, who's trying to say that we're in an organic matrix and try to lie about the demiurge of this reality? So the Gnostics against Gnostics.
And so you concluded that it's all coming from the same thing. It's two opposing ideas coming from the same source.
Here's the thing. This is like me trying to be objective. All of the themes beyond simulation and matrix, all of the themes that we're experiencing and navigating in the spirit of this age are Gnostic core features.
Well, that's what I loved so much about our collaboration on the Hermetic principles, because there are 7 Hermetic principles, but really at the end of the video, you gave us the secret and you said, really, they're all one principle. It's all one super principle that everything is like a wave. Everything, there's this, one principle is it's a pendulum. One principle is that it's mentalism, and there's dualism. But really at the end of the day, it's all just this wave, this ebb and flow. Right?
Yeah. And so what that could be is even the schism between an aramonic or a hyper masculine lens versus a hyper feminine lens, and then that integration of them. It could be like, oh, once we get, I didn't like the energy behind the simulation. It was like, if people call it that, really what they're calling a simulation is a holographic reality. Consciousness needs to experience itself. So in this universe, it does it through the aspect or expression of itself of light. So it's projecting itself into light, hologram. So if somebody else says, well, that's what I call a simulation, that's fine. They don't need to use the same terminology as me. What I found very suspicious was how far that was going. It was going far removed into a very isolated, pixelated, scientific direction of simulation that then genuinely creates timelines based off of that level of evolution. And that's not really an evolutionary trajectory. And if anything, many are incarnating in the past, which is now, because they figured that out and that dead ended. They couldn't even reproduce.
Sarah, you just blew a light bulb in my mind. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
think I might understand the motive behind pushing this simulation idea.
Okay.
If you believe that we're in a simulation, if you convince people that we're probably in a simulation, I think they'll be very okay with living their lives out in another simulation. They'll spend their whole life in a digital world. They'll spend their whole life playing Second Life online. And they'll be like, all right, I'm trading one simulation for another. But if they think that this is real reality, that this is base reality, they might fight for it quite a bit more. They might not just roll over and be like, all right, just give me my video games and my drugs and, my feeding tube. They probably, fight for this reality quite a bit more. Just a thought.
Yeah, I really like that thought. And also, like, once again, we have Gnostics on the other end of the spectrum. saying we have to save them from that simulation. So that's why now that I see it from like so many different levels, I'm like, okay, simulation isn't always, let's say, the culprit. It's what we do with that and what direction we move with that, if that makes sense. Because like another way of viewing all of this, and this is just to expand this isn't like actually what I think, is like, what if the Christ consciousness needs to enter simulation to help the simulation get out of it? Okay, so yeah, so that's all stuff to bake new bread with. I would like you, if you feel comfortable, to, and please don't feel like you need to pick the hardest question, but whatever you do, if you would be able to answer.
I'm only seeing this StreamYard feed. I'm not seeing any questions. So if you want to pick a question and read it to me, I'm anyone that you like. Yeah.
Okay, so Panday says, can it just be real and not real at the same time?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't, you can spend your entire life thinking about this question, and at the end of the day, what do you got? Not a lot to show for it. So I don't really know what to do with this idea, but just maybe you can use it to appreciate whatever simulation you think you're in quite a bit more.
Or like ascend from it.
True. Yeah, I mean, I find that people that tend to think that we're living in a simulation are doing quite well, and they're quite successful and seem to exhibit and use a lot of free will. Whereas I don't know many people that are working at the drive-through in McDonald's that are saying, "Yep, I'm in a simulation. Yep, this is a great level here." Like, no offense to anybody that works at McDonald's, but I think people that tend to have a lot of mobility and think that their life's a video game, and maybe they think it's a simulation a bit more.
Right on. Yeah. So also, what's the, did we mean organic matrix? Because an organic matrix is animal tissue. So it could be Sophia's womb. And so an organic matrix, we could be, you know, and that's what the fourth density is. The fourth density is like a womb, and then we're projected within the fourth density. So we're like in the womb of the fourth density. And then simulation can kind of be like the demiurge. It's like, yeah, if you go too fragmented, then things become less creative possibility.
That's a really interesting idea. Terrence McKenna spoke about this, where the entire story of life on Earth is told in the womb, where you notice that the fertilized egg turns into, it starts off as like a single cell organism, multicellular organism, then it becomes like a fish, and then it becomes a salamander, and then it, you know, it morphs into, it takes the form of many different life forms before it eventually becomes a human. And then birth is like the event horizon.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. Okay, you guys, are you going to ask a question to Mark?
Don't worry, I won't be offended by the lack of questions.
No, it seems like there's somebody in here who would love to hear Sarah expound on eggs. I promised Jen Crowler I will another day. Well, egg. Yeah, that's too, there's a lot of esoteric symbolism behind that. So, okay, really quick. So I could like make this a video one day, but it won't be high on the list. So to answer it right away, the egg is the serpent's realm. Your egg is your aura, but also it's showing the context behind the symbolism is more than just the aura. It's showing that it's wrapped in the serpent's realm, which is why you'll see the Ouroboros around it. And then there's many different esoteric interpretations with that, but I'll just tell you the one I resonate with the strongest from my gnosis, and that is that it's because you have the potential always. Do you know how Morpheus in the movie The Matrix tells somebody when they get on the phone, he says, you can make it at the end. He wouldn't be telling you what he's telling you if you did not have that possibility, because Morpheus represents what you can see. He didn't say it would be easy. You'd have to almost be put in a really weird situation, which is why Trinity's always like, they have her purposely show they purposely show how crazy you'd have to be to actually make it. But she knows in her head, she goes, he said I could make it. So then she chimes in with her ability and goes, he said I could make it. Whatever she does from there is based off of her power of that belief that Morpheus said that. So she makes it happen. That's the egg with the serpent wrapped around it. The egg represents you're in the realm of the serpent, but you can always evolve. You can make it. I couldn't leave them hanging. Sorry. They kept asking.
Oh, I can't see the questions. So.
Oh, okay. So here's the question for you. You guys are already asking questions. He's my guest. You're embarrassing me in front of my guest. Because keep asking me questions. Okay, Mark. What is the music that you really like listening to right now?
I really got back into 80s music, strangely enough. I had this insane urge to just go through all the 80s music, and I think it's because I just had a daughter, and I believe that was probably the music that my parents were played when I was born. And I think some sort of, because I'd never been into 80s music, and now I can't get enough of it. And maybe some sort of thing inside me was unlocked when having a daughter that connected me back to 80s music. I don't know.
That is so beautiful. Is it that one song? She blinded me with science.
Yes, exactly like that.
I love that song. Okay, so
but feel free to answer questions that they're asking you, and don't let me stop you from answering their questions.
No, now I'm like really curious. Like, is it like who's gonna take you home? Like what songs?
Top Gun, Danger Zone. You know, you start driving and then you realize that you're driving like twice as fast when that song is playing. It just makes your foot like a lot heavier on the gas. It feels like you're gonna take off. A lot of the 80s music is just so optimistic. You know, everything that's newer is a little bit heavier about how like dark our times are, and maybe the 80s were just a very optimistic time. I'm digging it.
Okay, so I will now reveal to you that 80s is one of my favorite types of music. I've been slowly like so excited. Like I was like, oh, so what's your favorite? But like I love 80s music.
It's great. It's kind of corny, but it's amazing.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. So now that, what would you say? Like people want to know, like, how do you interpret quality of life? I saw you go on a hike one time and I was like, wow, his reality is so cool. Like you must, because you've collabed with Graham Hancock. You collab with such interesting people. You yourself are an interesting person. You've cultivated so much. So like, what is, and please, you don't have to be, but I would appreciate it if this isn't like just a sentence that sounds like a stump speech, but like, I want to know, my audience wants to know, like, how do you navigate this awakening? And what tools do you use to be in your power to have quality of life? And what would you even call quality of life?
That's a great question. There's a tool that I use quite a bit. I refer back to it a lot. It's called Ikigai. It's a Japanese principle. And it's 4 circles that intersect. And you have, what are you good at? What do you love doing? What does the world need? What will people pay you to do? And the intersection of those 4 circles is like your life's purpose, your sweet spot. And if you're missing any one of those 4 circles, you're going to have issues. So anytime I have issues or I feel off balanced, I return to that. I'm like, all right, what circle am I missing? If I'm feeling empty, maybe the world doesn't need what I'm doing right now. You know, I could be getting paid millions of dollars, but if the world doesn't need what I'm doing, if I'm some sort of like scummy corporate lawyer that's ripping people off, I'm going to feel like crap, even if I'm good at it, even if I love it. If you're miserable, you don't love it. If you find yourself quitting a lot, it's maybe because you're not good at it. And if you're broke, you got to have an honest conversation with yourself. People aren't willing to pay for it. So I find that those 4 pillars are very good at um, honing you in on your sweet spot.
Beautiful. Yeah. That's really about like balance. A lot of times we think balance is a stasis, and it's not. It's dynamic. Absolutely. And what we could also be calling equilibrium or balance is also from another lens, like harmony. And that's what I really hear is like the harmony of these different realms is what all feed in almost like a Vesica Pisces to that central like vortex.
Yeah. And on a personal level, I just had a daughter, and that's been like the happiest. This has been like the happiest few months of my life. And, it's been hard, but it's so awesome and fun. And I haven't really even been thinking about these like dark things. I used to look into politics quite a bit. I haven't paid attention to any news, any politics. I've just been trying to figure out how to be a good dad.
Wow. Will you also father some of the people in the chat? I'm sure. No, really, the world needs fathers like you. So I hope you know what you're doing is way more than just what you. It's
Aw.
so far beyond you what you're doing.
Oh, it's so fun. It's such a blessing. Like every day I take her out on this walk through the forest, and we touch the plants, and we look at the creek, and the first couple of days she's like, what the hell's going on? But then, after you do the same route over and over again, she's like, oh, there's that flower. Oh, there's that mushroom. That mushroom wasn't there yesterday. It's like you're starting to see the circuits and the light bulbs go on, and it's just awesome.
That is so beautiful. I was going to congratulate you at the very end, but I'm glad you actually talked about her before, because that is so cute. Now, may I ask her name?
Angel. Yeah.
Yeah, she's an angel for sure.
Yeah, she's cute. She's, definitely melting my heart.
Oh, I'm glad that Angel chose you to be her father.
Yeah, the problem is I haven't even been focusing on my after school or my before school as much. Every time I leave the house, I race home to just get back and play with her. And then I'm like, wait. You got to make this video about toxins. You got to make this video about these pesticides. And so it's hard to get out of the frame of mind and focus on these dark things that are happening to people when, my reality is such a light little fun thing happening.
Well, actually, that's really deep, because if you think about it, like the world has a lack of the fatherly, like healthy fatherly, divine masculine presence, right? And how much of these things that you need to make videos on, that I need to break down, would actually almost be obsolete due to like what you're doing. If you actually think of the like order and structure that would produce.
Totally. I'm starting to really begin to see it. Like the mother is everything. Like if you don't have a mother, you're just not going to survive.
And the breastfeeding.
Yeah, she does 99% of the work. And then I'm kind of like on the sidelines, like, what do I do? And pretty much the main thing that fathers like to do is play. And play is incredibly important at encouraging somebody to believe in themselves. Like if you haven't had proper play when you're young, most time you don't believe in yourself, and you're not willing to take risks, and you're insecure, and you're traumatized, and lots of issues stem from having a father. If you don't have a mother, you just pretty much don't survive.
Right. No, absolutely. Well, just so you guys know, Mark's wife is one of the most popular tarot channels on YouTube. She's a master proficient tarot reader who has a very thick, 500, 800 page tarot book.
Oh my God. It's massive. I don't even know. Probably 800 pages.
She's very easy on the eyes. Your baby's gonna be like stunning.
Yeah, she really likes you, by the way. Yeah, I hope you guys meet.
I would
Yeah.
love to. Yeah, I love to talk tarot with her and ask her questions.
Yeah, like you were talking about earlier, where there's certain spiritual ideas that you're just like, okay, that sphere's there. I'm gonna go on to this one. Like, she's into all these spiritual things that I'm like, all right, that's there. I'm gonna go look at this geology or this ancient ruin. You're gonna go look at that tarot card. Perfect. We'll like join forces and we'll like, you know, it all works.
Thank you so much for this beautiful talk. It was like, honestly, I'm not even just saying this. This was an hour and a half of gold. I don't think one thing was not like super substantial for my audience. So thank you again for agreeing to this. And I'm just wishing you always the best, you and your family, and congratulations.
Oh, well, I can't wait to meet you in person. I feel like we're pretty good friends now and we haven't even met in person. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really look up to you as an amazing educator, communicator, content creator. Super great combination of awareness and just letting it fly. Great combination.
Thank you so much for that feedback. I deeply appreciate it.
Of course.
All right, you guys, sending you infinite love and gratitude. Thank you. Bye.